I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time discussing this in slide form. Instead, I want to demonstrate this using IronSpeed Designer. But I do want to call your attention to one very important feature of the application wizard, and that's the application generation options dialog, which you access in the application wizard by clicking the options button, or later on from the pull-down menu called Tools. The application generation options dialog has over 200 different options that govern how your application is generated. So you have a very fine degree of control over what appears in your application. There are three basic groups of options. The first are new application creation options, which come into effect the first time you create your application. The second and most widely used set of options are the new page options. Those are used each time you create a new set of pages. You may be surprised to learn that you can come back to the application wizard multiple times when building your application and use it to create different sets of pages, typically for different sets of users. For example, you might create one set of pages against a set of tables for internal users where they have more features available, and a second set of pages against the very same tables for external users or customers of your company that have a more limited set of features. Finally, there are general application options that control how individual control types, component types, and so forth display and behave in your generated application. Those typically have immediate effect. Now let's jump into the application wizard. This is what IronSpeed Designer looks like when you first start it up. Very briefly, I'd like to call your attention to the coming attractions list over here on the right-hand side. We update this very frequently, sometimes several times a day, and they show in chronological order the upcoming set of training webinars that we have, symposiums, product sales, and so forth. So you'll find all manner of interesting things there, and it's definitely worth a quick 5 or 10-second glance when you start IronSpeed Designer. I'm going to start my application by clicking the Create a New Application button, and that brings up the application wizard. In the first step, I'm going to select the page style. IronSpeed Designer has 27 different page styles to choose from, kind of in all shapes, size, and colors. If you hover over the little bullets right above these thumbnails, you can see what version or product edition of IronSpeed Designer the particular page style is available in. I'm going to select McKinley, which is my current favorite page style, and move to the database server step. Here I select the database type and database that I want to connect to. IronSpeed Designer supports 4 database server types. There's Microsoft Access, SQL Server, MySQL, and Oracle. I'm going to select the Southwind Microsoft Access database that we include with your IronSpeed Designer installation. That way you can repeat these examples at home if you want. Next is probably the most commonly used step in the application wizard, and that's the Pages step. We have 26 different page types that you can generate, and they're organized by table pages. You can see proformas over here in the middle as I click around. We have record pages that generate pages to display and edit individual records. Workflow pages, which are used to implement business processes. Reporting pages, which as the name implies, are useful for management reports. We have emailable pages, which are typically used by IronSpeed Designer's send email facility as part of a workflow process automation. And they're great if you need to alert someone that they have workflow that's pending, or you want to send an email to a customer confirming their order. And finally, we have printable pages, which as the name implies are designed to be printed and typically don't have some of the extra accoutrements such as a navigation menu and other artifacts that are meant for navigation. I'm going to select the 9 default pages, but I could select any subset I want. And now I'm going to go over here and select the tables that I want to generate these pages for. So I'm going to select all of my tables, all 12 tables, and a couple of database views, for example, the current product list and the quarterly orders. So I'm going to generate 9 pages for each of these 14 tables and views. Clicking Next, we move on to the Keys step. IronSpeed Designer scans the selected schema, tables, and views, and determines if any of those tables and views either don't have primary keys or they don't have a foreign key relationship with the other selected tables. If you think about it, it's a little bit odd if you don't have a primary key, and certainly very odd if you selected a table or view that doesn't have a foreign key relationship, because that makes it an orphan table. You know, you can build an order entry system and include a table of baseball scores. Nothing wrong with that, and they wouldn't be linked together by a foreign key relationship, but it is kind of atypical. So in this case, it's offering several candidate primary keys as virtual primary keys. And in this case, it's guessed correctly. These are primary keys that I can use in these two database views. Now, if I didn't see anything I liked or it guessed incorrectly, I can click the Add Additional VPK button to display the virtual primary key dialog. And what I can do there is set up my primary key if I want. Similarly, it's guessed that the product ID field here in the current product list refers to the primary key field here in the products table called product ID. That's probably a good candidate for a virtual foreign key if you think about it. And it's guessed right in both of these cases, so I'm going to select those. Now again, if I didn't see the foreign key relationship that I wanted, I can click the Add Additional Virtual Foreign Key and select one here. And in fact, I can select multiple foreign key relationships for individual tables. Now, in the case of a Create Virtual Foreign Key, we essentially have a from and a to field expressing both sides of the relationship. Next, you can select multiple languages and generate, by default, a multilingual application. Now, I only speak English, but I'm going to select several other languages here. So I'll pick, for example, Danish and German and a dialect of Norwegian. You may have noticed in the upper right toolbar in your generated application that there's a little globe icon. If you click that globe icon, your application user will be presented with a select language page that, in this case, will show these 4 languages that I've selected. Next, we select the application name, which can be anything, and where we want it domiciled, and then the code language, .NET Framework, and a few other options that I'm going to leave selected as my defaults. Now we're going to generate the 126 web pages, which you can see here just by expanding this list, by clicking the Finish button. At this point, IronSpeed Designer is going to generate an N-tier web application. It's going to generate those 126 ASPX web pages. It'll generate a presentation layer set of classes, one class for each page, and typically a class for the database, the user interface controls on the page. Next, it'll generate an empty business layer, which is typically where you would add any code customizations you might want when you modify or extend the generated application. Then it will generate a database access layer set of classes, and those are typically about 8 classes for each database table and view that you select. And finally, if you had selected stored procedures, and your database, of course, supports stored procedures, it'll generate a set of database stored procedures for your application as well. And then the data access layer will go through those stored procedures to retrieve and insert records from and into your database. Finally, after it's generated all of that, it'll launch your completed, fully generated application in a web browser, and it'll call upon the .NET Framework compiler to compile that application so you can see and explore your application in the browser. And that's what it's doing now. So at this point, we just need to wait for the .NET Framework compiler to complete its work so that we can look at our generated application. Okay, and there we have it. Since most of you have already evaluated IronSpeed Designer at least a little bit, I won't spend a whole lot of time going through the generated application. Instead, I'm going to go back to IronSpeed Designer. We'll close. and now will be placed on the live preview screen in IronSpeed Designer. Now you'll notice that the application here in live preview looks exactly like the application that Designer just launched in the separate browser. And that's because it is your actual live application. That's why we call it live preview. It's your application running in a browser inside of IronSpeed Designer hooked up to your actual database. So as you scroll around and mouse over things, you'll see that it's actually using live data. You can even navigate within your application. So if I select, for example, Show Orders, it will take me to the Show Orders table page. And in fact, as you click around and navigate here within your application, you'll see, for example, that the Application Explorer over here on the left-hand side is also updated to reflect where your current navigation position is. So in fact, you can navigate your application both ways, either through the Application Explorer or by using Live Preview.